All right. Well, welcome everybody to this town hall. I have to admit, we were pretty excited about our regular scheduled program, which this is the normal time slot of our open payments huddle, which are our every 2-month community calls, which we usually go a little bit deeper into an aspect. We have special guests, we have topics. We were going to be doing a researchers roundtable where we were inviting, I think through 4 or 5 different researchers that had worked in the ecosystem and then done projects and then done, some research or some UX and UI design research, so on and so forth, to talk about their work and to share with you all and to build together. But obviously, with the news of Coil and some changes to the ecosystem, and we already had this time booked, we figured we would change the topic and come right at this and start having an open conversation, because I know people definitely have questions and they have different implications about their work and what you're working on. We will return to our regularly scheduled program of our community engagements, and we will be rescheduling the researchers roundtable. So we were actually very excited about that one, and so we're just pausing it for the time being as we talk about stuff that's a little bit more timely. All right, and with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Interledger Foundation's Executive Director, Brianna Marbury. He's going to talk about some of the things moving forward, and then we will have, answer some of your questions from the community space and social media, and then that you might have here, and hopefully build some new understandings of some ways forward and ways to participate, with the knowledge that we are not going to have many of the answers today, but we do view all of you and the community at large as a way that we will figure them out together. So, Brianna?
Thanks, Chris. And thank you everyone for being here today. We look forward to having an open discussion with you about what's next. So as I said in our statement before, and as I said in our meeting yesterday, the Interledger Foundation is independent, and we always have been independent from Coil, even though they were in the same ecosystem that we were in, a community about open standards and protocols. Coil was built on the Interledger protocol, which is an open standard, and this means as a community we can continue to build on those foundations and create a stronger ecosystem moving forward. What happens next is left to be determined. We understand that a lot of your projects were dependent on Coil and Web Monetization. We recognize that, and we want to make sure this has the least effect on you as possible. So I'll be working with the team over the next couple of weeks to see how exactly we can fill the gap of Coil with you having the least impact as possible. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Chris, and so we can start our discussion about what this means and where do we go from here.
Thank you, Brianna. And as Brianna said, it's going to take some time and to sort some of this out. So we do ask for patience and participation, quite frankly, as we move forward. And the first step was having this conversation. We've started to collect some of your questions. I see actually in the public note-taking doc, people are taking notes and they're adding their questions and comments. That is amazing. So continue to do that. We're going to start looking at some questions that were raised through the community space. So these are the ones that kind of surface quick. I think that probably will help answer a bunch of things, but also feel free to jump in. If we need to stay with one of these topics, we certainly can. I'll be relying on my colleagues to just even open their mic and pause me if someone wants to talk. So use the raise hand if you want to say something at some point or in some way, maybe at Aisha in the chat who's monitoring that. So I'm going to start out with some of those questions. One was, are you aware of the reasons behind Coil shutting down its operation? Was it related to technical issues or business adoption or timing or market fit? The real baseline answer there is that as an independent organization, we don't have oversight or insight into what the reasons are as they were being made or now afterwards. We're of course working with them to think about what happens and the implications, but this wasn't something that we were, a part of any kind of decision-making process, nor did it influence our strategic positions often. What we really are worried about is what this means for the work of web monetization. And we believe that they're demonstrated through most of y'all's work and the work in the broader ecosystem, that there is still forward momentum on that. There is still some exciting pieces that can be pulled up. But we do want to stress that as an independent organization, we did not have, this was not a coordinated effort or something that, we had control over. What we do have control over now, though, is what happens to the web monetization standard, what happens in the work, and how, more importantly, do we foster and facilitate and support the growth of this ecosystem. So that role remains, and in fact, I think in some ways becomes a little bit more centralized. Pausing just in case anyone's going to open a mic, but if not, I'll continue on. Another question is, why is Coil transferring assets to ILF?
I can take that question.
Yeah, what?
I can take that question, Chris.
Go for it.
So Coil is transferring their assets to ILF because they want the work of web monetization to continue. And so it only makes sense. They're really a proponent of this, even though Coil is closing operations. They're really proponents and really believe in what they were doing before with web monetization. And so they're donating their assets to the foundation so that we can continue this work. And yeah.
So Brianna.
Yes.
Sorry. So when you say the assets, does that mean the everything that Coil had? So people paying like the $5 a month to get that kind of subscription? Is it that part, or is it more like the technical assets?
It's more like the technical assets. So the subscriptions, no, they're not going to be transferring that over to the foundation. The subscription service will no longer continue.
Thank you.
And we have to decide if that's something that we want to do, like the foundation or a subsidiary having that. Do we want to help spin up another organization that's in the ecosystem to be a web monetization provider? Do we want to do several? That's something that we have to decide in the coming weeks.
All right. Thank you. Good example of just breaking in and doing a follow-up. So thanks, Adam, for that. So the other question that came up in a few different versions of this is, what about the solutions that we have built already, which I think is basically, what about the stuff that we've already worked on that many of you use interledger funds to build and to support? What happens to that? And the one thing that I want to say right off the bat is that I don't think anybody should disable anything that they've implemented in terms of web monetization. This is where this is why we built with standards. This is why this technology was built on open standards and open protocols, so that companies, projects, initiatives could come and go. But the work in sort of building these fundamental new open payments, open financial tooling on using the internet is so that these can grow regardless of what companies come and go or what initiatives come and go. So I think in some ways, what's gone on here is a validation and a strengthening of the open protocol and open standards approach to this work, which Stefan and Coil kicked off. And that's, if you want to think about legacy, that really is the legacy that this leaves, is that all of this continues to work. And so for you all that have implemented some version of web monetization on your site, on your platforms, on your content, on your tools, etc., I would say there's no reason to go and take that off. Hopefully, there will be other solutions that come on. We'll be working towards helping to think about and resource and drive what those might be. We always knew that we needed more than just one. It's a little unfortunate that we're in a situation where we kind of got caught in that reality that you see when there is just one. But all of your projects that are web monetized are ready and able to receive the next version of people using this technology, whether that's a digital wallet, whether that's a new web monetization service provider. So I don't think there's any real need to go and disable this functionality on your work. The one thing I would say is, of course, you're going to have to go and change some of the onboarding or the sort of language where you say, go get a Coil account, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, there's some messaging and some marketing and probably some onboarding pathways that might change, but I would really urge you to keep the technology active, even if it's a bit dormant. Web monetization isn't broken from the implementation side, from the receiver side, from the producer side. It just has no company right now facilitating that consumer layer that's going to be able to activate that. So I think it's important to understand that piece. And in fact, and I'm going to, I'll give you a quick 30-second heads up, Alex, on our ILF team. In fact, you were just getting ready to release a new version of the web monetization spec that really has all stakeholders excited, has some potentially new stakeholders excited, and I think really shows some positive momentum that this technology and the proposed standard is advancing and improving. So, Alex, do you want to turn on your mic and talk
before we go to Alex,
Yep.
Allison, you had a question. Can you elaborate on what you mean by the assets going to increase through the ILF?
No, I was just curious whether the assets that's being transferred to ILF in turn will become part of a fund to keep dedicating attention towards web monetization. And maybe those will increase in time through the ILF, through other resources. It was more of a curiosity.
When we talk about assets, we mean like the technical and IP. We don't mean like funds, like actual money. So, but we do plan on continuing the work with web monetization going forward. All right.
Just a quick question for Chris. With when we're talking about, getting it out to our communities about the fact that they should keep their assets web monetized. For a good chunk of users, that's through WordPress and through the plugins. Will Coil's plugins still continue to work, or should we be getting messaging out there to sort of push people towards Pipe, the new Pipe web monetization plugin?
I'll take that. So Coil is transfer as part of the assets. Coil is donating to the foundation is the WordPress extension, and we plan on supporting the WordPress extension, same as the actual extension, because we feel like those are tied together. It's part of the developer experience of making it easy to be web monetized. And the code inside of that extension has nothing Coil specific to it. It's actually pure web monetization. So we'll continue to maintain that.
Thank you.
Well, Alex, you might as well talk about the updated spec now. That kind of is actually a good transition.
Right. That's a good transition. So the updated spec. So ever since we went to TPAC late last year and we got Google interested in the extension, interested enough in webinization to allow us to put it in Chrome behind the flag, we've kept a close eye and worked with them on the spec. We've recently made the new change that aligns the way currency is represented in web monetization to the way currency is represented in a somewhat related web API, the payment handler API. And we made that change. Google actually reviewed it and they're very happy with it. We are literally, I think me and Sabine still have to review the last version of the spec, but no, Sabine did it this morning, right? Sabine messaged me this morning. I'm the last one to put my seal on it. But after that, we are ready to release the spec with a new change. Google was very happy with it. We are still working with the extension to update the extension to actually reflect the new spec. And after that, we're going to publish the new one. And in more happy news, Igalia, one of the people responsible for putting webinization into Chrome, have found a resource for us to use to start working on putting Web Monetization into Chrome behind the flag. So that work should start soon-ish as well. And that's all for the good news.
All right, so thank you, Alex. We're probably going back to you again a little bit.
There was
go
a
ahead.
hand raised. Did
Sure.
someone have their hand raised? I think they unraised their hand.
Okay. What support is available if my solution doesn't work before an alternative coil is available? So I'll give you the hard answer first. There isn't overt support in a way that comes in right away once coil goes away. Now that I'm talking support again on the consumer side, there's nothing that's necessarily going to replace those customers or replace that consumer technology to engage. And I really want to stress that this isn't about you as producers or you as platforms or however you're using it on that side of the coin. It's still completely viable, is still going to get service, is still going to get updated. The ecosystem is going to grow and the technology is going to grow. It's on the consumer side that those gaps need new solutions, more players will need to emerge. So I just want to be clear about that, but there's not, I think it's March 15th or March 30th, I don't remember right off the top of my head, when Coil will cease to be operational. There is not going to be an immediate replacement for that service. And so if you've been relying on that income, which, quite frankly, I don't think many of you were. I think one of the things that we've learned is through, some gaps in the ecosystem and just complexity of use and the still emergent nature of the technology, nobody was funding large swaths of their work through web monetization. Some are getting close, and I think a lot of you have done amazing work to push that forward. But hopefully this isn't going to be, a massive hit into anyone's immediate revenue stream that can't bridge to what may or may not come next. So I kind of wanted to start with just that hard reality. The more positive take is, though, that this is what we're looking to advance. So our grant making, how we look at funds, how we work with you all in community to build new solutions, to share solutions across, that work just continues. In fact, I think probably strengthens and becomes more intentional about how we might do grant making or how we might do programs or how we might make strategic partnerships that advance that or that start to make up these gaps, and not just make up the gaps, but actually grow the ecosystem, right? It's not just about filling what was now gone. It's about continuing the forward momentum. And so I'd say, with that, that's funny, Adrian, I'm going to go to you right in 2 seconds, because, one thing that another thing that we're excited to talk about is that we, I think as of just recently, hot off the presses, and we'll be talking about this with more of a public announcement in the coming weeks, we've actually entered into a strategic partnership with Findboss, which is really the first, world's ILP-enabled sort of non-crypto backed wallet. And what this will do, and Adrian can go into this a little bit deeper when I hand it off to him. But basically what we're doing is we're subsidizing the fees for Findboss to acquire new users, the fees that might go to those users in a typical scenario, as well as the fees and financing to look into new regions and new locales and activating those. When Findboss launches, it'll be US dollars, US only, but they have a pretty aggressive plan to go and activate new locations. And so we'll basically be subsidizing that work, and which means subsidizing you and y'all and your audiences, at least in the regions, as they exist or they come online, to actually have a real ILP digital wallet that will give you payment pointers, that will pay payment pointer to payment pointer, and basically opens up open payments in the browser. And in fact, I think in some cases, this actually is beneficial to the web monetization rails that you already have in many of your projects. So that's an exciting bit of news. Been in the works for a while, wasn't reactive, but it was well-timed. And I'll hand it over to Adrian, the CEO of Findboss.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, definitely not reactive. In fact, Yeah, there's a bunch of things I want to say. So apologies, interrupt me if I'm taking too much time. I think on that point, part of the reason we started Faneboss was that the four of us who were at Coil had been discussing within the company at least 2 years ago the fact that more Interledger enabled wallets were essential to the ecosystem. I mean, this is not something that's news to anybody. And I want to just point out one thing with the Coil model that is important to be aware of. So part of what was holding Coil back was the fact that Coil is not a money transmitter. Coil's not a bank. They're not a wallet that's able to move money. And so any web monetization that Coil was doing was Coil paying the end users. So it's just a business making payments to individuals with their own money. Basically it was a transaction where Coil was buying content from websites. So when a Coil user visited a website, Coil was buying some content from that website so that their users could, get that benefit. And that's really important nuance, because what we did over, I want to say, at least 2 years ago, was build tipping into the Coil extension. We wanted to make it possible for people to send one-off tips, send money. And the reason we couldn't do that is because as soon as a Coil user is sending money to the website and Coil's an intermediary, Coil becomes a money transmitter, and Coil couldn't be a money transmitter. And that was part of the motivation for spinning out Faneboss and actually creating a wallet that could do that. And that's always been part of the plan for us, is to facilitate that. So I think it's important to realize that the model will be different here, that what we want to enable is that somebody has an account with Faneboss can send money to somebody else who has an account with Faneboss. It's not our money getting sent to anybody. So I wouldn't see us as a drop-in replacement for Coil, but I would see us as infrastructure that allows other people to become replacements for Coil, which didn't exist before. So that's something to bear in mind. If anybody wants to be the next web monetization provider and they're ready to go live before the end of March, let us know. We could make it happen. It would be US restricted because that's where we have licensed partners that can operate. But we've already done the work with our licensed partners to make sure that that use case is something they can support. We can open a business account for somebody that wants to be a web monetization provider. They can put money in to that business account and they can disperse it via, web monetization payments to other Faneboss users. Definitely before the end of March, if we can get it all the, everything lined up correctly. So, if that's you, if you're on this call and that's you, bear that in mind. Let me know that that's what you want to do. Let's talk about how we can make that happen. I understand it's frustrating to A, have it limited to the US, and B, have it kind of closed loop within Faneboss initially. We're doing what we can to solve for that. So as Chris pointed out, spreading into different jurisdictions, it's a major undertaking every time. There's a reason that, for example, PayPal's not available in some countries after having existed for decades. It's really hard. We have to find a financial services partner in each country and so on. So our hope is that we don't have to go live in every country. Our hope is that other people in this community have a country where they want to target, where they want to get set up, and they do the work that's applicable in that local jurisdiction to get the license or get the partner who has the license that they can build on. And we've learned a lot of lessons over the last 18 months about how to go about doing that and what it entails. So happy to try and be helpful. And if you can do that grunt work and you can get set up, then I think, us being able to send payments to your users' payment pointers and vice versa, that should be goal number one. The interoperability pieces, this is what this is all about, right? That we have a wallet, we can issue payment pointers. Somebody else has a wallet, they can issue payment pointers, and we can send money to one another. And then we unlock all of these use cases. So I just wanted to, I've kind of gone back to front on what I wanted to say, just to follow on from what Chris said. I think another important point I want to make is Interoperability and open standards are hard. I've been doing this since I joined Ripple in 2015. I think we've learned a lot along the way. I think the Coil closing down is evidence that there's some stuff we were doing that doesn't work and we need to rethink it. Some of it we already knew about and we're already trying to fix, and it's just unfortunate timing. I think the new Web Monetization spec is a massive step forward, but I think there's an opportunity here for us to all look at how Web Monetization works, what use cases we want to support, what does and doesn't work, and be creative. Think about how we could adjust or better serve the market. I think someone made the comment about product market fit. Coil didn't find that, is my take. There were not enough people signing up to get a Coil subscription to pay for streaming content, and it's really hard to find product market fit when you're trying to build a two-sided market. It's near impossible. So I think we've got to be creative about ways we solve that problem as a community. We certainly keen to try and do our part as the sort of infrastructure or facilitator and work with others to do the same. I think, we have to be creative there. The reality is interoperability is not a strong incentive. Nobody out there goes, oh, I can't wait to be interoperable with everyone else. I know, for us at Ripple, when we started on the Interledger project and then at Coil, we're all believers in openness and interoperability, and that's a big piece of the Interledger mission. But it's not a commercial incentive. If you've got a market, you've got a whole bunch of users, making your users available to your competitors through interoperability is not something you're going to dive into, feet first, just because it comes along. We've got to show strong incentives for others. And I think in general, the incentive to become interoperable or to adopt an open standard and be interoperable is when there's one big incumbent that all the small incumbents want to, club together and take on. So yeah, I think we've got to think smart and think scrappy and think about, what are the use cases that are badly served today that we can go after. That was Coil's mission originally, was micropayments is a badly serviced use case. Streaming payments for content is something that no one can do with existing payment rails. And so let's start a business that can do that as a way to, push Interledger forward as the payment method that solves that problem. Turns out it wasn't a big enough problem. It wasn't a problem that enough people were desperate to solve, or there may be other reasons why it didn't get the traction it needed to. But we have an opportunity to learn from those mistakes and fix things, and I think we should take that. So that's I'm going to stop there. I don't want to steal up too much time, but we definitely our current thinking is getting live in the EU and the UK as soon as we can. Potentially getting live in South Africa, where a lot of our team is based, just because I think it could be an easy win for us with our local networks and contacts. But we're very keen to hear if others are making progress on getting a wallet set up that can hold real money, that we can sort of connect the dots and make our payment pointers interoperable. Something to bear in mind is, we started this in the days when we were at Ripple, and we built a lot of our early implementations and experiments on crypto. And I think there's great evidence of why the crypto ecosystem is so fantastic for incubating payments-based ideas. You don't need permission. You just, deploy a node, you buy some cryptocurrency, you can transact with random people you don't even know. As soon as we step into the formal financial system, that all changes. So I think part of our mission, with Interledger should be to try and find ways to break down those barriers, even though we are now constrained by, regulation and so on. And we're not alone in that. Financial inclusion is a mission that a lot of people are pursuing. And in a lot of cases, the obstacles are regulatory or the like. So, whatever we can do for us at Mainboss, the mission is around user experience. How do we give people a digital wallet that's a pleasure to use, that's easy to use, that's interoperable with other wallets, without them needing to know things like bank account numbers or credit card numbers. That's what we're focusing on as our wedge. And I think everybody's going to have a wedge. We can't expect people to adopt Interledger just because it's nice, or because it does nice things. Everybody who's in this community has to be building a sustainable business on top of Interledger, and we've got to be leveraging, you know, what we're doing together to grow this ecosystem. If it's not sustainable, you know, eventually, all of these projects will fall by the wayside, just like Coil did.
Awesome.
I'll hand it back to you, Chris.
Yeah, and I see Maria, you got your hand up.
Hi, this is so exciting. I have been waiting for Findboss to happen for a long time. We come at this from the perspective of civil. I don't know how familiar you are with that, but like we have experience in the difficulty of getting consumers to onboard digital wallets. And this is kind of what brought civil down in the crypto winter of 2018. There's so many people. We have use cases right now that people will immediately go for that. You know, getting people to use digital wallets to pay for subscriptions, for micro tipping. We built a micro tipping system, and I know this stuff will work. In my opinion, Coil didn't make it because of the passive nature of the transactions. You weren't able to leverage the excitement of readers and viewers to make those payments happen in the heat of the moment when they're excited and want to pay for something. This is what we've been working on. We have a lot of experience with it. We've been at it since 2018. I cannot wait to get this thing cranked up. But I will tell you, after many years of thinking about it, I'm convinced that what needs to happen is I need to be able to, as a crypto novice, I need to be able to use a debit card, put some funding in a wallet, and have that be able to pay for smart contracts, for like, you know, work that is done through blockchain technology that doesn't involve like having to, you know, do KYC at Coinbase with your passport, which is just really exhausting to people. And these regulatory problems, I just wanted to ask all y'all who know the issues at Findboss. We went through so much difficulty, SEC difficulty, CFTC difficulty, like all these problems that were purely regulatory and that made things difficult. So can you speak a little bit to like how these problems have been addressed and like why there's permission now, you know, in the US, and what are the constraints on that permission for us moving forward?
So I can't speak specifically to crypto because we made the decision upfront to, as you say, cater to the person who just wants to sign up and connect a debit card. Conversations with banks or licensed entities who you want to work with become significantly easier if you tell them you're not going to be doing anything with crypto. That's the reality of the current ecosystem. You know, I have nothing against crypto. As I say, I think it's been an incredible, you know, technology for incubating various things, incubating ideas, teaching people about money, you know, all sorts of positive side effects. So our business decision was to stay clear of crypto. And we knew it was going to be harder to build what we want to build. We were very tempted at stages to say, let's just use a USDC wallet, for example. But the reality is, as soon as you want to interoperate with anybody else, you're either in the crypto world or you're not. And if you're not, then you need to be working with a licensed entity, and they need to be doing user onboarding that meets their regulatory, you know, their regulatory requirements. And anyone you want to interoperate with has to be confident that that's being done. So that's what it boils down to. Basically, there's no such thing as anonymous digital payments in the fiat world. And I mean, that's a very sort of blunt, simplistic view of it. But we can't send money to some imaginary or anonymous person on the internet. We have to know who's on the other side. And likewise, it would be the same the other way. So my guess is the standard procedure is going to be if any two wallets in the Interledger ecosystem want to peer, they're either both already connected to a payment scheme that has handled all of that. So, you know, we're working with a bank, you're working with a bank, both of those banks are connected to, I don't know, RTP in the US or, you know, MasterCard or something. And there's a way for us to just send each other money. And so that's fine. We can interoperate and we can, you know, send to each other's payment pointers. Or our banks get together and they do a due diligence on each other and they say, great, we're comfortable with each other's onboarding process. So I know if I send money to you and all I know is it's going to you bank, that the actual beneficiary is somebody you have vetted and KYC'd. That's pretty much my understanding after, a couple of years of trying to get this right, is that's what it boils down to, is if a bank is not sending to someone that they have checked themselves, then they only want to send to another licensed entity who they trust has done the checks. That's kind of what it boils down to. And then, I mean, then there's nuance on top of that as well. So it's not as simple as just, okay, cool, we've now got a pipe between our two banks, we can just send money. There's a whole lot of risk stuff as well. So banks want to know source of funds, they want to know the reason for the transaction, they want to know, all sorts of additional stuff. And generally the way they do that is they don't ask on a per transaction basis. They ask up front. When you create your program with the bank, you say, we want to create a digital wallet. We want our users to be able to load funds into that wallet. We want them to be able to send funds to other people who have a wallet. We want them to be able to cash out. You give them the whole list of things you want to be able to do, and they sign off your program. And as soon as you want your users to be able to do something new, that has to be approved for the whole program. And sometimes there's some nuance where they'll say, okay, up to this limit for that use case or whatever. But that's generally how we found it to be. And different partners and different providers will have different focus areas. So some will be happy to facilitate P2P. Others are more interested in issuing cards. Like probably the most prominent use case in the US is you find banking as a service providers or banks who want to help you sign up users and give them a card so they can earn interchange revenue. That's the business model is as simple as that. Or sign up users so they can sell them credit. Remember, the bank partners are always looking for they're always looking for a revenue stream out of whatever they're doing. So in our case, we partnered with a company that historically were a remittance business. They've come from a long history of remittances into Nepal, and then have grown from there and are licensed in Canada and have bank accounts in the US. And they're a fairly small, scrappy business, but they bought into Interledger from the beginning. When we explained to them this idea that we want to have, we want to be able to send people money through these payment pointers, and we want to make it easy to do cross-border, they were on board. So I think if anyone wants to launch in the US, I'd be happy for you to speak to MarkNet and, basically launch a copy of what we're doing. That's great. Like, as far as I'm concerned, like rising tide raises all boats. We're that it would be super easy then to peer with you because we're both using the same license partner. So that's sort of the process you got to go through, and it's been painful. We went through 4 different FI partners before we finally got this right. We started with MarkNet. They didn't have the capabilities we needed originally. We went to a different bank who got investigated by the CFPB for not doing enough due diligence on their partners' business plans. So not that they were doing anything wrong from a compliance perspective. The CFPB said to them, you are giving bank accounts and banking services to neobanks and wallets who are not going to be around for more than a year or two. They don't have a solid business plan, and that puts their customers at risk. And so that's what they were investigated for. So they paused all new programs. We could no longer go live. We moved to a new bank. The CFPB report came out. The new bank changed the risk profile of everyone they were talking to. So we were 2 months of due diligence down the line, and they said, sorry, we're no longer doing programs for early stage startups. After that CFPB report, things got a lot harder for anybody trying to do this. So it's a very difficult road. That's the reality, I'm afraid. But I will caveat to say, I think the US is probably one of the hardest. It's pretty mature in terms of people facilitating the ecosystem, like banking as a service providers. But in Europe, you've got a whole different class of license, so the e-money issuer and e-money distributor. You don't actually have to be a bank at all. So you can, there's a bit of background noise, but I'll try and talk over it. So in Europe, you should have an easier job. And then in each jurisdiction, it'll be different. Sometimes you need a bank, sometimes an e-money license, sometimes something like that. I know in India, there's a concept of payment banks. So unfortunately, like in each jurisdiction, somebody's going to have to do the legwork to get set up. And I've been chatting to Brianna and Alex and the team at ILF. I really think that's somewhere where the ILF can really help in a kind of coordinating function and make sure we're trying to seed one wallet in as many different jurisdictions as we can and facilitate the connections between them, find the partners to do the cross-border settlement to make that all work.
And I'll put in and we're running short on time, so I'm going to try to get to a few more questions, both if you have so if you got a question you'd like to speak in the video, go ahead and raise your hand now. I will say though, as most obviously you are wonderful community members, have sort of been paying attention as we've gone forward. Many of you are grantees, are involved in a grantee project. This is why last year we came out with the financial services call for proposals. That's why even this time last year, we were making some slight pivots to looking at those other parts of the ecosystem. So I will highlight that the 12 grantees that we made have just put their interim reports up on the community space. And there is some fascinating, detailed look into versions of what Adrian is talking about, but in different places across the world, whether that's in Uganda, or whether that's in Mexico, or whether that's in Brazil. So we're, so some of the stuff that Adrian speaks about, I love how, payments are hard, open protocols and standards are hard, right? So it's a kind of a double dip on hard. And I think, a lot of us, and I'm guilty of this as well, a couple of years ago when we kind of all raced into it, there's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of what can happen, what can be possible. We're going to turn the ad industry up on its ear, we're going to change the way people pay for content. Those things, that excitement only lasts for so long, and then you kind of settle into the long game. At these things, you taking on, these big institutional things, sort of sometimes it's systemic inequality, global inequality, all kinds of things, that regulatory environments, very real fears. All these things start to rear their head when you start to get, more active, deeper into it. And I think we're in that stage now, where we realize that those of us who believe in some of the core principles here and the values of this technology and what affordances can have, we're settling in for the long game, right? This is going to be protracted. There's going to be bumps in the road. And so I think that's a big lesson that all of us can have as a community. And Jacob, I see you've got a yellow emoji hand, so I will turn the mic over to you.
Yep. Hello. I'm Jacob Ford. I'm a developer for the Brickhouse Cooperative, working with Maria. And we got or at least I got a Findboss invite, and have been having a lot of fun playing around with it. My question is, I know your next step is to implement the invoice protocol for simple, simple payments. And I'm curious, will your banking partners allow that to be kind of like a drop-in replacement for payment processors like Stripe and other checkout providers, or is that something that we would have to implement and you would only be the payment recipient for a USD-backed transaction?
Yeah, good question. So we've already started that conversation 6 months ago, maybe not quite. Being a facilitating consumer to merchant payments adds a little bit of complexity. I think I raised this on the Interledger call this week. Payment gateways do a whole lot of additional work when they process consumer payments. Like they've got to vet the merchants that they onboard, make sure none of them are on sort of are doing business that's not allowed by their bank partners or their payment system partners or whatever. There's a bunch of extra fraud and risk stuff. MarkNet are very keen to help find a solution to that, to make that work. So we're certainly very keen to facilitate it. We've been building proof of concepts and concept videos for e-commerce for the last few months already. And we definitely want to be able to do it, that you can pay with your payment pointer online. That's the idea. Like it's a use case we love. It really fits with our mission of making user experience better. But our approach we're taking, which is maybe some kind of the other way around to, I think, historically what we've done within the Interledger community a lot, is to start at the user experience. Start by showing how the payment pointer checkout flow would work, and then build that into our product. And maybe initially it only works if both accounts are with Feinboss, but then we go out to the market and say, look how amazing this user experience is. Wouldn't you want to implement this? You know, wouldn't you, Shopify or Stripe or whoever in the ecosystem, acquiring bank, want to be able to accept payment pointers? And then we solve the harder problem after that of how do we wire the payment rails together under the hood to make that work? How do we get that like internet effect of you know, the true interledger vision? So yeah, look, I mean, our approach from day one has been to do things that way, more top down than bottom up. And I'm kind of hoping we eventually meet in the middle from all the foundational work Interledger's already done on kind of the clearing protocols and so on. We get to a point where we do meet in the middle. If we try to build from the bottom up now, basically we're saying merchants and customers have to only be, you know, Feinboss customers, which kind of defeats the purpose of the whole interoperability thing. But that's definitely, yeah, the short answer, that's definitely a use case we care about, and we've given ourselves a goal of Q2 this year to have it live. Yeah, let's see.
All right, Tuan,
Yeah,
I
that's
see your
fantastic to hear. Thanks.
Tuan, I see your hand. I'm going to get to you in just a second. I'm just going to hit a couple quick ones from the text questions. One, I see, are there any plans to create such a standardized provider and integrate different wallets into it? Maybe build such standardized web monetization provider after the torch is passed? The quick answer is that we don't know. That's what's going to be sort of, you know, at ILF and in the broader community and others, we looking into how we pick that up. I will say this is that we're dedicated to being part of the solution. That solution can manifest itself in many different ways and a multiplicity of ways. But that's our best commitment we can say now, is that we do want to advance this ecosystem and will be given this. And it was already our intention to see more web monetization providers in this ecosystem before this. So this puts a little bit of fire underneath that, but it actually doesn't change a core direction to begin with. So we don't know yet how that will look like, who that will be, what kind of programs we will run necessarily, but we do plan on being part of the way forward is the best answer.
I make a quick comment there as well, Chris. Like,
sure.
From a technical perspective, it's worth understanding that the Coil extension is sort of fulfilling two roles today. It's there because web monetization is not built into browsers, but it's also there to be the web monetization provider. So it's the Coil extension, but a big piece of the Coil extension in theory could be run by anyone, and then they could plug in on top of it as the provider. In an ideal world, all of that piece is built into the browser, and I think that's what Alex alluded to earlier, that we're getting positive signals from browser vendors that they may consider doing that. So then what's left is, if you're a web monetization provider, in other words, you're the entity that represents the user with the money, or you're just the entity, like in Coil's case, that has the money and wants to distribute it over the web, you get to choose when to make payments and how much. That's the role you play. But the actual integration into the website and all of the emitting of events and the parsing out of the payment pointer and the communication with the website's wallet and all of that stuff, that's standard. And I think it should be very easy today for somebody to go and download that stuff. It's all open source, and just release another extension that's exactly like the Coil one, but it's a different provider. So that may be, and I don't want to dump this on Alex, but that may be the role the ILF has to provide initially. But that's a good topic to, I think, discuss as a next step.
So part of the weaponization provider roadmap or weaponization roadmap for this year was that we were going to break up the extension. So Adrian put it very, very good. The extension is a 2-for-1 special right now. So part of our roadmap was to split that up so that the weaponization part was decoupled from the provider part. And Open Payments was designed with one of the goals being everybody should be able to be their own weaponization provider. So instead of signing up for a provider, you just plop in your Feinboss wallet, right? You'd connect your Feinboss wallet to the extension, and you'll be able to choose the amount of payments you want to make on a website, basically becoming your own weaponization provider. Now, that was on the roadmap for later in the year, and we're gonna look at that roadmap as soon as we release the new spec to see if we need to accelerate some of that work, if we need to shift some of that work into more usable components. But as Chris said, today we have options and possibilities. We'll know more in the very short future, in the very near.
But we'll know some. Just to be clear. All right, Tawanda, I'm gonna come to you in just a second. I do want to say that there's still some unanswered questions in the document. We will go back, and we've got written out answers. We can craft some new ones. We'll go and answer all of those questions, and when we circulate this video in the community, we'll also have those Q&As, written out in print so we can share those. So if you didn't get your question or issue answered, we will be going and picking those up. It was, an hour is not going to be enough time, and in some ways it's too much time. So, but we will go and pick that up and get you answers. And if you have your name attached to it or something like that, maybe we can tag you, or just to make sure that you see it. So we will make a commitment that we will pick up the rest of those questions or ones that we haven't fully addressed. Although I think broadly we've covered lots of aspects of that. All right, Tawanda.
All right, thank you, Chris. Hi, everyone. I'm Tawanda from Snake Nation, and we are part of, the current financial services grant. And our project, we're really trying to solve the same problem that, congratulations to Adrian and team that, they're really trying to solve, which is also providing, an intelligent capable wallet. My question really was, around what the mainnet, so to speak, is going to look like now. I understand that, we had the three big players, which, Coil was a part of, which was also GitHub and Stronghold, if I'm not mistaken. And, I understand, Adrian, you guys are staying away from crypto assets. I don't know if that is for now. And I would imagine that would, complicate, you guys pairing with the network that, Stronghold and GitHub are on. So I might be asking this wrong. So let me take a bit here and you just check.
No, it's a good question. No, so
right.
I think right now the network consists of Uphold, sorry, not Stronghold, Uphold, GitHub, and Uphold, GitHub, and Coil. Although the reality is only Coil can send payments on that network. Uphold and GitHub can only receive. So at least for now, the easiest way for us to get back to something like that is for us to be able to send to Uphold and GitHub. So we're already talking to them to try and make that work. And the fact that they are crypto wallets is not a problem in and of itself, because they're both licensed. They both do pretty comprehensive KYC on their users and so on. And we wouldn't settle with them in crypto. We would just settle with them in USD. So both of them have operations in, well, GitHub don't, as far as I know, but Uphold have a license in the US. They fully licensed, I think, in most of the US states. So we would be able, through MarkNet and our bank, to be able to settle Uphold and send them payments. So we've got a whole phased approach to pairing with Uphold, which we've been discussing with them for 6 months. And the idea would be that first prize is for us, you sign up for a Fanboss wallet, you put some money in it, and you send to an Uphold payment point, and that works. That's simple, straightforward. So that means anybody who gets a business account with us can be a web monetization provider, and all of those Uphold payment pointers out there on the web continue to work as expected. GitHub is a little more complicated because they're not set up in the US, but we're talking to NA, and they're a little more flexible technically, but a little more challenging, from a business and governance side. So we definitely want to get that working, and Brianna and Alex and the team are helping a lot to apply some pressure. We're doing what we can to get them moving. It's not we've got to make it a priority for them. So I think if anybody here is building products that's very dependent, where you have users that have Uphold payment pointers, and you can persuade someone at Uphold or send them an email or whatever and say, hey, like, we really want our Uphold payment pointers to be compatible with Fanboss, that wouldn't hurt. But that's the plan from our side, right? And then the phases are we get sending working, and then ideally with Rafiki production ready, it becomes a lot easier for those guys to implement the full suite. They can do sending to us, they can support open payments, they can support everything else. In the really easy lift is us just being able to send to them, and they don't have to do too much extra work. It's a new settlement arrangement, and that's it. Not much technical.
Okay, all right. And I'll just one last question there. So is there going to be like sort of like a checklist, or I would say for anyone else who's trying to peer with whatever that new main network is going to look like. I do understand right now that if you're integrating through MarkNet, maybe they could kind of like handle that. No, I'm just thinking, is there going to be like some kind of like a checklist, or I don't know what better way to use, just like all of the different steps that kind of if you're going to build your own private, for lack of a better word, IOP network with your group of users or ecosystem, like what we're trying to do, for example, and then go out and look for people to peer with. Is there like a set of requirement that we should kind of be on the lookout and know that, before we go to production, we need to check these boxes for us to be able to peer with, this network, for example?
Yeah, it's not a technical problem. It's a legal and compliance problem. Like all of those check boxes are basically, and so what I explained earlier to Maria about like the process that we went through, it's going to be something like that as my guess. So, if you've got a wallet and you've got users who can deposit money and you're holding fiat currency for them, that's probably in an FBO account at a bank somewhere, or it's e-money with an e-money issuer somewhere. That entity, you need to go to them and you need to say, hey, this is what we now want to do, right? We want our users to be able to send money to these guys over here, and they will, and you need to start a conversation about how do we settle that? How do we facilitate that payment flow of funds? And it's going to have to, we're going to have to work with those licensed entities to help us make this happen. And I think every time we do this, we'll learn more, and I'm hoping, we can come up with a playbook of some sort, and that the ILF will be able to help facilitate that a bit and say, cool, here's the playbook, and we keep making it better and fleshing it out and so on. I think that's the best we've got for now.
All right. We are,
thank you.
We are at time, and I want to respect that everyone gave us an hour. Just a couple quick things. We will be going back and answering stuff in the document. We actually did a pretty extensive Rafiki update, including a demo of the new test net in yesterday's ILP community call. I will put the link to that call in the stuff that we distribute about this call as well. So if you want to double click on that, I would suggest it. The test net, which should be coming out in the next few months, is going to be pretty exciting and start to let people play. I think we were calling it a playground, Rafiki Playground. I think that's an apt name for it. I want to, this is just the beginning of this conversation. Please leave anything else you want in the public note-taking doc. If you're interested in being part of a smaller working group looking at some of these issues, put your name and your interest down on there. I think one of the things that we might do coming out of this is have a little bit of a, subcommittee or subgroup that is kind of looking at community thoughts about the future of web monetization. So just name your interest. You're not committing anything, but something that you might want to be followed up on about. And with that, a deep gratitude and thank you for being on this journey with us before, during, and after. We're sorry for the disruptions, but I think what we've talked about today, some of the news, some of the updates, and some of the look at where this is going is I think that this ultimately is there's a lot of momentum going forward. And like I said, and like many of you said, this is hard. And it's not just hard technically, it's hard socially, it's hard communication wise, and it's hard regulatory and compliance. So let's just all get back to work. So thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Chris. Ciao.